everybody. Welcome to the Find and Follow podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. This week, I'm excited about this one. We sat down with Jeff Bianchi. Now, Jeff Bianchi is a former professional baseball player, and he and I talked about youth sports, managing them as a parent, figuring out kind of how to make family time first, how to navigate some of the issues of youth sports. We really got into it. This is a bit of a long one, so please hang in for it. But hey, without further ado, here's my conversation with Jeff. Jeff Bianchi, thanks for coming in today. Why don't you talk a little bit about, well, we're talking youth sports today and kind of navigating them as a parent. Talk a little bit about kind of your relationship to athletics, sports, what have you, and a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I'm excited for what we're about to dive into. My background, my name is Jeff Bianchi. I'm a local kid, born and raised in Lancaster, graduated from Lancaster, Strasburg in 2005. And in 2005, I was drafted by the Kansas City Royals in the second round. So I decided that it was best to start my professional baseball playing career at the age of 18. And to make a long story short, I played 12 years professionally with 4 different organizations, the Royals, the Brewers, the Red Sox, and the Rockies, in which I had about 2.5 years in the big leagues. After the 2016 season, an opportunity came with the Brewers to scout. Got done playing in 16, landed a job with the Brewers to scout for 4 years with them. And then COVID hit, a lot of changes were made, and for the last 4 years, I've been with the Lancaster Stormers as their hitting coach. Within that, roughly 2.5 years ago, the Lord just kind of really pushed us into the youth sports space. So for the last 2 years, I've been operating what's called Bianchi Baseball Academy, where I'm training youth athletes in the game of baseball. And so that's kind of my main focus right now in what we'll be doing in the future.
Right, and you guys, you and Nicole, you have kids. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you're comfortable with like names, but ages of kids. Yeah. It's how many and which ones?
Yeah, we have 3 kids. Our oldest is 10. We've got 2 girls and a boy. Our oldest is 10. Our middle is 7. She's almost 8. And then our youngest boy is just turned 6.
Awesome. Yeah, and I could say as I don't know, I guess it would have been the middle one. Your daughter played soccer with my daughter, and yep. If you've never watched your daughter play with the child of a professional athlete, it is she's incredible at that. It really is a fun soccer player to watch. So talking about this thing of, you look at, I think some people would look at kind of your story and rightly would say, wow, that's awesome. Like, somebody who was in athletics around here, built their way up to, ultimately being drafted and getting to play professionally. For some, and many parents are listening saying, well, yeah, that's the goal. That's what we're hoping for there. Let's talk about kind of youth sports, right? Generally, right? Because I think as a parent of, I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year or a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, to be 10 end of the month. And I just getting into the very front end of it have been surprised by, oh, okay, this gets really busy really quick. So talk a little bit about, maybe somebody's listening and they're saying, well, yeah, sports are, it's only on Saturday, or it's only this, or it's only that. Talk about maybe the typical schedule for like a 10-year-old who's taking baseball seriously. Mm-hmm.
Well, you are right in saying that schedules in life can get busy really quick, especially when you add multiple kids onto that. So I'm still learning a lot about the space. This youth space has changed tremendously since I was younger. I played every sport you can think of, and I loved every one. And I was a kid who played multiple sports at a time during, like for example, during the fall season, I at times played soccer and baseball, and then I went to wrestling. I played basketball, so I did play many sports. The culture has changed and the schedules have changed tremendously over the years into a busy, hectic life, if you allow it to. And so, it varies depending on the organization, how many kids, how many teams a kid's on. But for example, for the spring, I'll just baseball related specifically, right? Since that's my background. You may have a 10-year-old, there's local organizations that have their own organization teams, right?
Rec
and
leagues
so,
or whatever,
rec leagues. And so they could be practicing a couple times a week and playing a couple games a week. On top of that, you have travel organizations now, which is, a whole separate organization than your club team. And you could be practicing a couple more times a week with a few games on the weekend. A lot of organizations like that have games on the weekend and tournaments on the weekend. So you're playing club. If you're on two teams, club games a couple nights a week. Your whole weekends are gone playing travel games and trying to fit in some practices in between. So it's a 6, potentially 7 day a week. I won't say job, but I mean, there's a lot of hours involved.
And if you have multiple kids, you say, I think we said to ourselves when our kids were younger, one sport, one thing per kid. And you tell yourself that, it sounds like, that'll feel super balanced. And then you live it and you're like, oh.
Yeah. And even that one sport per kid, right? Like if you have 2, like we have 3 kids.
Right.
And our youngest is 6. And so he's certainly expressing interest in sports. And so if you have 3 kids in 3 different sports on 3 different teams, and with 2 parents,
right,
it's challenging to navigate the schedules and the rides and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah. So here's kind of the rub is you hear that and you say, man, that sounds like a lot. I don't know. But then, I think back to middle school, high school, especially high school, and I'm sure you as well. And I have these fantastic memories, these like awesome experiences of just team sports, the friendships I built, of people I'm still close to, the experiences I had. Really, in some ways, like the ways that, I was a distance runner, and the ways that shaped my ability to overcome challenges sounds a little maybe silly, I don't know, but like it really did. It affects like your view of self in some really positive ways. So sports do a lot of positive things, and I think as parents we feel that. And then on top of that, there's scholarships and potential to play professionally. And hey, my kid seems really good at this. What is it? Maybe I should invest in this. Maybe I should. And you watch the Olympics and you see, okay, they went, they did this, and now they're an Olympian. So there's this side-by-side pressure where I think most parents would say, we want to have a balanced, good family life, and then I want to create every possible opportunity for my kids. Big question. I know I took it a million different ways, so feel free to parse out parts.
Sure.
But like, how do you navigate that as a parent? And I think specifically for you, because we know from watching sports, a lot of athletic talent is genetic, right? So you have this thing that brought you to these stages that you got to be on, and you probably see aspects of that in your kids, and just kind of how do you think about it? How do you navigate it? And again, feel free to take the pieces as you will.
Yeah. I look back at my childhood, and I had a great childhood. I love sports. They were a huge part of my family. I come from a family with 3 kids, an older brother and a younger sister. So we were very heavily involved in sports. Some of my best memories, as you're alluding to, are from high school. Honestly, I can't remember how our team did when I was 8 and 10 years old.
Right.
10 years old. I just don't, you know what I mean?
Right.
But at 16, 17, 18 in the high school years, we did win states my senior year of high school. That is towards the top of my all-time favorite baseball memory, because those are the guys that I grew up with. They were my best friends. They were the group that we gelled so well together, and the parents did a phenomenal job with us in creating that environment. But winning states and dogpiling there when we won and sharing those memories is something that will always be at the top. I played professionally. I played in the big leagues. I can remember my first hit, my first home run, all these firsts, right? But that sits up there with those as well. When it comes to how do we navigate the schedules and, because there's a lot to unpack here.
Right. I think specifically going, and if you're going to say something different, I want going all in versus balance, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the feeling of, well, what if I think the feeling you struggle with as a parent, what if my failure to invest leads to them not getting as far as they could?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think there's unfortunately not one right answer for every situation. I'm very thankful for my parents and what they've invested in me, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money. There's a lot of finances that go into the youth sports, nowadays. And so how we navigate that, I think, is circumstantial. It's different for everybody. I think we as parents, my wife and I, we don't have all the answers either. Like, we're trying to navigate the same thing as well right now, because we have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old who love to play soccer. And, we're being asked, hey, play indoor, you want to play travel, this and that. And it's very challenging to know sometimes what to do, what's enough, what is our family dynamic. I think what we have to do is take a step back and say, okay, what do we want our family dynamic to look like? Some love, get life out of sports, and they love going and doing this and that. And for some, it's not so much. They like a little bit slower pace, and hey, we'll play a season of this and then we'll take a break from that. So we're still learning that ourselves. We actually said no to a couple things this winter just because we felt like, we had a long spring, summer, and fall of sports, and we need a little family reset. And it's hard for me because, I see, you can pick out some, talent amongst kids, right? And, you want to invest and give your kids every opportunity to succeed, because sports has a lot to offer. They do. And I'm talking more in terms of character building for the long term, because when you're my age, when you get older, maybe younger, maybe older, I had to take off the cleats at 30 years old. Some are younger. So eventually sports is going to come to an end where you're going to be done playing. So who you are beyond that is so much more important. And so we just, in our situation, just kind of have to take a step back and really try to hear from the Lord, because it's challenging. The pressures that you face from the other coaches, the pressures that you face from society, and just of trying to keep up and doing what everyone else is doing. The fear of you're thinking your kid's going to fall behind. But the last time I checked, there's really never been an 8-year-old go pro in baseball or soccer, football, right? So the reality is we're chasing something that's really, we've lost reality to.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because right now we want the kids out there having fun. If they're going to be in sports, maybe they're playing multiple sports. We want them having fun.
Right.
Learning valuable character lessons that are going to help them in sports and beyond. We want them learning and developing as individuals, as being able to work as, part of a team. So there's definitely a lot to gain from playing sports. The navigating of trying to keep up and the fear of, falling behind. Those are challenging because they're real pressures that everyone has to decide. Like I said, my yes might be different than your yes. And so we've really just tried to say, Lord, what's our priority? Our priority has to be God first and foremost. And then hearing from him in terms of, what we feel like each kid needs, each kid wants, and trying to put things in perspective that the best 8-year-olds most likely aren't going to be the best 18-year-olds,
right?
In 10 years.
Right.
That could be the case, absolutely. But a lot of 8-year-olds who are playing soccer right now might not even be playing soccer in 4 years.
Right. I even think sometimes the best 18-year-olds, I'm a Phillies fan, right? I'm curious which ballpark you hit your first home run in. But, one of the talk about Bryce Harper is how crazy it is that, for an athlete who is the chosen one, right? On the cover of Sports Illustrated, for them to be 35, I don't know how old Bryce Harper is, but for his career to have more or less worked out as predicted, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I mean, he still hasn't won a World Series, all that. But the point is what you're saying is true from 8 to 18, and it's even true from 18 to, like you look at in the NFL right now, Bryce Young was drafted first and has been benched this year. It's so yeah, I definitely agreed that. I want to talk about one thing. What does the Bianchi SUV van look like as you guys are leaving sporting events? Because you talked about building character through sports. What types of things are you focusing on with the girls as you're trying to use sports to teach character? And I feel like I see you guys most Sundays. Is there some trick you guys have developed to scheduling?
So we are very intentional about our priorities, and priorities. Number one, like I said, has to remain faithful to the Lord. I mean, he's just like that can't move. Our family dynamic is very important to me. And so when it comes to like what a car ride looks like after, it can look different, but especially with our kids' ages right now, like one, hey, did you have fun? You look great out there. Especially with what I'm doing in this space, I see pressure being put on kids, 8-year-olds, that no adult should have that type of pressure from anybody, let alone their parents. And you can just feel that weight. And so I feel like, and I've had comments of parents and families coming to me who really kind of say, we're coming to you a lot just for the encouragement to help our kid, his self-esteem and to build him up. And that's a huge part of this, especially at this age and the culture that we're living in. These kids need built up more than ever. So it's encouraging them. It's lifting them up, whether you're on the sidelines or not, or in the car. You look great. Did you have fun? What's one thing that you did well today? You know what I mean? It's so easy. I think just our human nature is to first look at the negative, like what we did wrong or what we could have done better. And I did that for many years, like I was constantly evaluating myself, and I needed to constantly make sure that, those areas that I was deficient in, I was constantly working on them to keep me at the level that I needed to be at. But if that's all we're focusing on, if we're only focusing on the wins and losses, especially at this age, that's not what this is about. It's, what are you doing well? Great job. I saw you do this, awesome job with that. What's one takeaway that we can continue to work on, this week or at home or heading into the off season? So you want a little bit of both. And, I'd love to hear from parents or coaches what they've experience, because I'd love to incorporate that and add that into mine. But we do put a priority on that and making sure that, sports does not run our lives. It's a part of our lives. It's been a big part of my life. But sports isn't who I was. It's not who I am. Baseball's not who I am. It's what I did for a short time.
Right.
It's the space that I'm in to hopefully make an impact. But yeah, we really want to get to the heart of each individual versus, what we're seeing today.
Right. And I think that's what you said is interesting about aging out of it. Right. I read an article once about professional tennis players. I think specifically it was about professional tennis players and Olympic gymnasts, and about how usually for those two sports specifically, you're kind of hitting your peak at 19, you know what I mean? And just how they noticed a common crisis of, who am I if I'm not this? You know what I mean? Like if I can't do this at a high level anymore. Maybe talk about that. Like I'm sure you had guys, for those who don't know, the minors are a bit of a buzzsaw, right? Like, it's not a high salary minor league baseball, I didn't specify. Yep. It's not a high salary situation. You're living in motels. You're sharing rooms with guys. Or I think you and Nicole were married during that time. And
correct.
When I talked to her about it, she said, I actually found a lot of positivity about it. Like we got to build communities. We got to make and but I'm sure you were with guys as they went, oh, the dream's dead now. Like they said I got to go do whatever. Yeah, talk a little bit about. I know I'm springing this on you, but talk a little bit about like what you learned relative to the character lesson, like what you learned watching guys kind of process that.
Well, something not just learning from the other guys and their experience. I mean, I went through the same experience of, I was drafted fairly high at a high school. And, as a kid, I would have told you my dream was to play Major League Baseball. And I got to fulfill my dream. It's unbelievable. And so at 18 years old, when you're drafted and, you have a set goal that's now obtainable, realistic, that you'll do anything for that. Right. And so it got to the point for me where, and I see this so often, and it's crept much further down in the youth sports, which is sad, but like I experienced having a stronghold on the game of baseball and getting to the big leagues. That was my main priority, and it took me away from what matters more at times. Mm-hmm. And when I did get to the big leagues, I would tell you the first 2 weeks was so unfulfilling. Mm-hmm. And it was such a letdown that I got to the big leagues. For 2 weeks I was there, and then I was sent back to the minor leagues. And going back down to AAA was one of the best feelings because it made me realize that apart from God, all this is meaningless. Like it really is. And so I was kind of putting that baseball on such a pedestal that it just took my focus away from some of the other things. And then when I reached that goal, it was an instant letdown because baseball is not going to fulfill me. Sports isn't going to fulfill me. Money's not going to fulfill me. Not that these things are bad, but in and of themselves,
not enough.
They're not enough. Nothing's enough other than, knowing the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's what I've learned and see in professional baseball and in sports too. The demand for trying to be great, which is awesome. I love the drive and everything, the building in that. But cleats come off one day, and then what are we left afterwards?
Yeah. I want to kind of slowly start to transition into, I feel like, youth sports is, when we talk about youth sports, like under 13. And then as you get into kind of the competitive years, right? Like the years where it starts to be, okay, I'm seeing talent here. I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. And again, like you said, every parent maybe answers this differently. Navigating that as a parent of, okay, my 14-year-old came to me freshman in high school and she wants to do volleyball camp at the Nook, right? Like, and it's I don't know what it is, $1,500, right? You know what I mean? Or whatever. And she wants to do it because of their friends, but I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, you're going to play, like, you're going to be a competitive volleyball player. Like, you're 5'5", you know what I mean? Or I don't know what an appropriate height is, but like how much, I mean, even, do you have any advice for maybe parents navigating that either through Bianchi Baseball or, whatever, as they've tried to say, hey, when do we decide this is a casual part of your life versus, okay, let's push the chips in?
I wish I had
a clean answer, right? Yeah,
right, because like I said before,
take them outside and do that.
Right. No, I mean every situation is going to look a little different, right? So certainly, like with the ages of my kids, I'm just speaking, personally, right? 10, 7, and 6. It's casual more right now. Right. We're introducing different sports to them. We've said no to different offers in terms of teams and travel organizations to be a part of during certain seasons, just because we feel like right now our family is a little bit more important. And like I said, like the development, there's so much time to continue to develop that at 8 years old, there's just time,
right?
As you start getting into...
Just to cut in, I think it's like helpful to remember there are stories of professional athletes who it's like they played volleyball until they were 18 and then somebody had them try basketball and then they got drafted fourth. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of there being time. Yeah.
For sure. I've had that many times. I've played with guys who are multiple sport athletes and they were doing one, and it wasn't until later in life where they picked up another sport or took the other one more serious. That absolutely happens.
Yeah, but I cut you off. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's great. So when it comes to like navigating and trying to figure out what age that is, for me, it was probably not until high school. Now, again, we've kind of already alluded to the youth sports industry. It's an industry now. It's changed, right?
A lot of money.
So it's more about the money now
right.
for these organizations providing that way than developing the kids, which is sad. And that's why I felt the Lord, one of the reasons why the Lord told us to enter his space is because I really feel like there's an opportunity to be a little ripple and to be a little change, even if it just affects a small area here in Lancaster County. But that age for me personally wasn't more till high school, where even in high school I played basketball and baseball, still multiple sports through my sophomore year. And then I decided after my sophomore year to focus on baseball. But, that's being crept down into 12, 10. You're seeing travel organizations have as young as like 7 and 8-year-old travel teams, which in my opinion might be a little young. I recently, this is a little off here, but I did recently receive an email from someone asking if I was training 2-year-olds. And I politely had to say, I think 2-year-olds a little bit young.
Right. Can they talk yet?
I know, right? Right. Am I babysitting or what are we doing? But yeah, I think, is it wrong to have your kid in a travel team? No. I don't want to say that. It's not. Yeah. If the situation allows it and you feel like it's the best situation for your family, for the individual, then yeah. Go for it. But for me, it wasn't until middle school into high school until I really started kind of seeing, okay, baseball is my passion. This is what I feel like I'm best at. And I really felt like at that time, heading into my high school, 9th, 10th, 11th grade years, that I wanted to pursue baseball beyond high school.
Right.
And so that's when I started entering more into putting myself in front of possibly some college coaches and maybe some scouts beyond college. But
right.
That wasn't until later into my high school that started happening. Again, things have changed and it's becoming earlier, but that was my experience.
Yeah, I think what you said about your role as a parent in looking out for your kids. I had said before we started recruiting, especially in baseball, there are, well, not especially in baseball, I suppose, but there are organizations that will offer training to increase, for example, pitch speed, velocity, or arm velocity. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the right term. Yep. But, speed. And even to the detriment of what their body is physically able to do safely. Again, from your experience, like you as a parent are the advocate for your child. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's
yeah absolutely, and any parent I believe would say we want what's best for our child. Mm-hmm. Right? And so this is where it's so tricky to navigate, because you're seeing little Johnny over here who's in this training at a younger age, and they're getting bigger and they're stronger, and kids are just, especially the high school kids, like these kids are more developed than they've ever been. They've right. been in a weight room now. They're stronger. They're faster. Athletes in professional sports are bigger, stronger, faster than they've ever been.
Right.
Yeah, that's the reality of sports right now. And so training is being done at a earlier age. Mm-hmm. In some cases, like you said, to the detriment of our physical capabilities. I mean, think about baseball. It's an unnatural motion and position that we're putting our arm in, and there's high school kids who are throwing faster than some major league arms right now at 16, 17, 18 years old. And so we're seeing injuries skyrocket, not just in baseball, but throughout sports in general. Because,
soft tissue stuff.
For sure, and soft tissue, ligament, major injuries at a younger age, because for multiple reasons. Our bodies aren't capable of handling the stress that we're putting them in, because we're not training the proper way. And we're seeing that creep in at a younger age than, unfortunately, it should be, than it needs to be.
Yeah, I know. I know it's interesting. You talked about the schedule of games, and I know one thing they've noticed in basketball is NBA players. If you look at, we just had an Olympics. If you look at country of origin of like the top 20 players, that used to be USA. You know what I mean? And then maybe like one, foreign-born individual. Now we're seeing almost a 50-50 split between foreign-born and United States, and I've heard some people talking about it, and they've said, well, the difference is like the clubs, the Real Madrids, who are basketball, not just a soccer team. There's a basketball side too. It's almost all practice. Like you almost never play in a game because the idea is like fundamentals and form and things like that are what matters, and we're seeing the Jokic's, the Doncic's, who are coming in with almost like perfect, just pure basketball. Yeah. Now baseball, primarily an American sport, but does it feel like it's more games, or is it? Are you seeing anywhere where people are starting to say, "Hey, let's focus in on health, well-being, stuff like that"? Or
no, I'm glad you brought that up because it's an area where I feel very strong about. We're seeing more and more games. It's all about the games and the quality of. I'm just speaking baseball, but I've heard this amongst the other major, sports. The quality of the game has gone way down. Mm-hmm.
Tom Brady just said it about football too.
Exactly, and he's saying that you had Tom Brady, one of the best quarterbacks, arguably the best ever, right? Is saying that, and I've heard it as a scout in the front office for 4 years. You see it, you hear it. Having a clearer picture of the youth space now in the last 2 years. The game is not being taught; they're just playing the game, and kids aren't developing. Mm-hmm. You're not practicing as much. It's all focused on the game. I actually had a conversation just last night with someone, a good friend of mine, who his experience with another parent was, I just want my kid to be on a team that wins. And I don't care if he's not playing, if he's the 12th man on the bench, and they'll pay whatever just to have him on a team that wins. And so our focus as a whole is more on winning and losing. And for me, I think it should be flipped, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now is training. Right. Especially like if you're going to come in at a younger age, which I've had some young kids come in, let's understand the fundamentals and work on the mechanics properly. So when you get older, where it starts to matter a little bit more, you're well developed and more able to adjust and make the adjustments that you need to make to hopefully put you in a position to maybe where you want to go. Yeah. But games are being stressed more and more than ever. That's what everybody wants. And to me, I think, especially at a younger age, games are important. Don't get me wrong. Games are important. You got to play. But you need to develop. And yes, you develop playing the games, okay? But there's so much value in the practice and the training before and outside of the games that's being overlooked right now.
Yeah, no, it's repetition of the right things. Like I played tennis in high school, and those few lessons that I took before my freshman year, just to say, hey, here's how you hit properly. You know what I mean? It just changes changed my trajectory as a tennis player. Now I was never great, but I was better than like the median, I think, because
and you're able to maximize. Right. Not every kid's going to play pro. Not every kid's going to play in college. Right. The kids that really want to, I think, have a greater chance because they're more invested in, but the reality is they're not. But even if you don't, that type of training is still putting you in position to maximize your abilities to have a great experience. Right. Whether you achieve the highest level or not, you're still putting yourself in a position to have fun and to compete and to create memories that, will stick with you. Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep going. I think we're going to end up probably we're in like a part 2 about like a high school sports type thing. Mm-hmm. Navigating as a I just thought about this as we were talking. Mm-hmm. A Christian parent who's saying, I want my kid in, positive Christian environments, right? And obviously here in, Lancaster County, there's excellent private schools, there's excellent Christian schools.
I showing my cards, I'm a believer in kind of public schools as a concept, right? And I like the idea of, I learned a lot culturally and personally from being in a public school. But like, maybe somebody is saying, I'm worried about my kid being in a group of teenage guys, teenage girls, and like kind of the culture of, I want to say locker room culture, which is an insane thing to say about high school sports. But I think you know what I mean, is like, how do you navigate that of like, oh, all the kids on the football team are doing this, or I heard, I could use an example actually.
Yeah.
I heard about somebody who was, their 14 or 15-year-old like was being pressured to try Zyn, like the nicotine pouches. These are, again, context here. These are nicotine pouches that go where chewing tobacco goes, and they're apparently not carcinogenic. I mean, that's what the company says, but that kids they're mint flavored and stuff, and kids are getting it on baseball teams. Stuff like that. I mean, you're not quite there yet with the kids, but like when you look ahead to that, first of all, that age of my kids keeps me up at night. Yeah. But
me too.
I don't know, what advice do you give parents that talk about that?
Yeah, we've been going through this journey of, again, I'll stress, like, as parents, we want what's best for our kids, and sometimes it's hard to know what that looks like and what decision that is that we have to make. I grew up in LS, public school my whole life. My wife graduated a year behind me at LS as well. We had phenomenal experiences at LS. I've traveled the country. When I was playing spring, summer, fall, I was gone. And then we always came home back here during the winter. And when we started having kids and our family started growing, we specifically bought a house here in LS just because we had such a great experience. We said we were going to send our kids to LS. And I think in Lancaster County, we're very blessed with the school systems that we have. I think we're in a really great area.
Yeah.
It's still a public school, but like we're in a phenomenal area.
Right. Bible belty.
Yeah,
bit.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. We were in a position with playing the schedule that I was in. Not only am I gone, but when I started scouting, I'm also gone, and my work hours are in the evening, afternoon evenings. Coaching, same thing. And so we were in a unique situation where we felt the Lord telling us, you know what? Have you ever thought about doing some stuff at home? And so we actually started very lightly, just like testing the waters, not too serious about it with the homeschool. And we started it, and we've been doing it here ever since we've had our first child in school. And this past year, we recently felt God just called and worked in us to enter into a Christian hybrid.
Okay.
Homeschool. Yeah, co-op. So they're in school 2 times a day, and they're home 3 days with us. That's just what we feel right now is best for our family. When it comes to them getting a little older, I would agree. I'm a little scared, fearful, and I don't want to be. But when we get to that stage, we want to make sure that whatever decision we make, whether it's where we're now, whether it's public school, private school, whatever, we want to make sure that our kids are well equipped for when those situations do arise. Right. And I mean, I can look back and I could name it. I'm not going to name situations and scenarios that I was in where maybe I would have made different choices. I was a good kid. I didn't make bad, terrible, but like, you're a kid, right? You do some dumb stuff sometimes. But we want to equip our kids to be ready to handle those situations and learn from them. So that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to instill the principles that we know to be true from the Bible. GCC has played a huge role in.
It's really great. It really is.
I mean, it's just unbelievable the role that you guys have played in our walk, in our families' walk, in our priorities, and how we do life. And so we want to equip them to be ready for the decisions that they're going to have to make when they're older. Because someday, we like to control them now, right? We're not in control, but we like to control everything. Someday we're not going to be able to.
Right. And so maybe talk about, like, as you navigated that stuff, I'm sure there were moments where there was pressure to, I mean, probably in the era you played, right? Like, steroids were still kind of around, right? Like, you know what I mean? Things like that. Like, talk about maybe the people in your life who did things that helped prepare you for those moments, whether that was like a parent or like a, you know, like a pastor, what were the things that you ended up looking back and you'd say, like, oh, that was a more positive influence in my life than I realized, or what have you? Like, what helped you navigate it as you to not, like, make some decisions that we see, you know, in the news of decisions people make?
Yeah. I think who we surround ourselves with is very important from a very young age. I'm fortunate to have a small nucleus of friends who I'm still best friends with today, who have been very influential in my life, solid believers. Each one of them either is or have at some point worked in the church at some point. And so surrounding ourselves with those types of people, for me, has been so important from a young age, going through middle school, going through high school, and even now being able to walk with them. I think surrounding ourselves not with just other like-minded positive influences around you who are similar ages. I think having mentors who you look up to and can go to as an example of how to live and what living a godly Christian life looks like is so important. I've had a couple of those in my life. And so having, I think, those people around me who have influenced me in such a positive way, and then seeing them read their Bible and seeing kind of how they live spoke sometimes more to me than what they actually said to me.
Right.
You know, because when I was younger, you hear some things and you think you know it all, right?
Right.
But when you look back, yes, there was wisdom coming from maybe I should have listened. But then too, you just kind of look at how they live too.
Right.
And so I've been fortunate to have people around me, whether it was family, close friends, family friends, to really impact and shape, you know, where I am today.
So as a parent, don't take that lightly, right? Like that, if a friend is coming around and you're not feeling great about them, you know what I mean? I, you know, navigate having that conversation of like, hey, what's going on here? You know what I mean? And, yeah.
I think as parents, we have the right to have that conversation, right? Like sometimes maybe, and again, our oldest is only 10.
And teenagers famously will take that well.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I feel like, you know, sometimes maybe we don't have conversations that we should.
Right.
And you're the parent still, you know what I mean? And while it's hard, you know, we have to have some tough conversations with our kids, you know, but I think those need to happen.
That's one thing my wife is definitely better at than me, is like, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's easier when they're younger, and I'm sure we'll get more challenging and difficult. But yeah, I think sometimes what I noticed as a youth pastor would be, and this is going to sound like I'm scorned or something, and I'm not at all, but there would be kids going through kind of a rough time, making some tough choices, and it would be like, oh, I wanted to start coming to youth group and make like better friends. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say like the toothpaste is out of the tube at that point, but that's hard. Like it's really hard to like, hey, once they're, you know, smoking weed, or once they're, you know, once they're doing this, once they're doing that, like, let's get them in a new group of friends. Well, like that doesn't work on two ends. One, like imagine that as a teenager, like somebody comes in fresh, like you don't have that. You talked about the history with kind of your nucleus of guys. Like, you know, you can't really microwave that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, so it does like, as you get into middle school years, start to kind of observe, because the people they're around will likely, in some cases, you know, a few of them will survive through those years.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some awesome friends who I've made, you know, the new friendships forming in the last few years, which is phenomenal, right? There is nothing like this group of guys who I've been friends with for, you know, 35 years, plus years. You know, I'm nearing 40 now. But
you look great.
Thank you. If I take my hat off, I don't know. Have it on. But
people always say to me, I thought you were older. And I'm like, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
But yeah, those friendships at a young age, I think, man, like as parents, we can kind of control that a little bit. Right. You know, and I think we're trying to be intentional about who our kids are around. and is who, we can kind of steer the ship a little bit at a younger age.
Right.
So that's what we're, trying to be intentional about.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything we didn't cover, anything that you kind of go like, man, if I was talking to a parent about like living in this world relative to sports, something I'd like to get across. I mean, I know we kind of were all over the place, but
yeah. I feel like when you start looking at the youth space specifically, it's very challenging to navigate. It just is. We're facing all these pressures from the world, from our friends, our family. We've had, heard stories and experiencing, just different types of pressures that are real or not real, that we can put on ourselves. The fears that come along with that we spoke about, with, falling behind or, just saying no to things. It's okay to say no to things. And that's one thing that we've had to learn to protect what's important to us with our family, with our relationship with Christ, while I've put baseball above Christ. I will not lie to you in that I've done that. I've experienced that. I've experienced the result of that. And so my advice to you is to really be mindful, be prayerful, lean on the Lord for wisdom, because every situation is different. At every season of life is different. What we are speaking of and working through now might look different for us in 2 years. But my challenge is what are your priorities? What's important to you? Does anything need to change? It's okay to say no, and let those, along with some others, kind of be towards the top to help you decide whether something makes sense for your family, what's right versus wrong, and just let the Spirit guide you.
Right. And, probably to a certain extent, invite other parents in who know you and love you and care about you and aren't going to like push you in any direction, but, be a sounding board.
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, that's great, man. Talk a little bit about Bianchi Baseball Academy, what you're doing there, and, kind of give you a chance to, plug that for somebody who's like, hey, I like this guy.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Like I said before, the Lord pushed us into this space. When I got done scouting with the Brewers, there was a couple opportunities to join the Red Sox organization to start a coaching career. And there was actually a couple. This is a story for another day. It's too long to tell now, but the Lord clearly, as we were walking through that path, kind of shut that door on us. And I felt like it was a decision that the Lord let me make, and I felt peace about it. And because of that decision, He said, you're going to enter the youth baseball space. And so for 2 years, I've had a passion about the training side of things. So I've been doing more individual, small groups, small practice type individual training and lessons. The development side is very important. Actually, through GCC, a couple years ago, we had the opportunity to go to Spain to do a baseball camp. Yeah. And so the last 2 summers, we've gone to Spain to run a baseball camp and share the gospel with people in Spain who know nothing about baseball. It's all soccer there. It's all different. It's anything but baseball. But through baseball, sport united us, and we got to share the good news. So the Lord is working in, I believe, what's more important than your stats on the field, your wins and losses, the character and who you are and what you believe is far more valuable than any number could, that could be put on the back of a card. So I am currently working through the opportunity of growth opportunities, seeking the Lord's wisdom in what that looks like in development in the youth space to try to do things different than some of the other organizations out there. My heart is for people to know and follow Jesus Christ.
Right.
And if it's through baseball, then how can we make that happen? But I am passionate about teaching the game of baseball. I love sports in general, all sports. So it's all going to be a part of kind of the pathway moving forward with Bianchi Baseball Academy.
Awesome. And how can people keep up with it? I think you have a Facebook page, but also
we have Facebook, Instagram. I have a website, BianchiBaseball.com. Yeah. Not super active on the social media stuff. We post and we do some things. But I feel like the heart behind it is has been more of a holistic growth opportunity where we're kind of using the two together. But we want, for me, like I said, I'm experiencing both sides for right reasons and wrong reasons. I want this to be a safe space where people can come and have fun and learn and grow, not just in baseball, but hopefully they get a little bit more out of it than that by the time they leave. So
yeah, love that, man.
Yeah.
All right, well, hey, thanks for making the time for it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Find and Follow podcast is a production of Grace Community Church of Willow Street. You can join us for weekend services on Saturdays at 6 p.m., Sundays at 8 a.m., 9:15 a.m., and 11 a.m. We are located at 212 Peach Bottom Road in Willow Street, Pennsylvania, 17584. My name is Pastor Addison Roberts, and I host the Find and Follow podcast as the digital ministry pastor here at Grace Community Church. We're so glad to have you join us. Be sure to share these episodes with your friends if you find them helpful.